Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. Senate Democrats looking forward after celebrating their latest victory, the advancement of the $3.5 trillion spending plan. We have what's in it and some of the challenges ahead. The Biden administration releases a new directive to immigration and customs enforcement agents, ordering them not to arrest or deport illegal immigrants who are victims of crimes. The administration calling the policy a victim-centered approach. The Taliban says they won't have peace talks until the Afghan president steps down. This while a top Afghan minister resigns as the militants continue making advances. Hundreds of protesters are still detained or missing a month after demonstrations erupted in Cuba. Some detainees who've gotten out and family members of loved ones who are still in custody share what they're going through. A controversial media bill is passed by the Polish government despite protests. It could affect a U.S.-owned TV channel that broadcasts news critical of the Polish government. Senate Democrats are celebrating 2 budget wins in 2 days. They're adopting the blueprint for President Biden's social safety net expansion on top of a smaller bipartisan infrastructure bill. But for Democrats, the real work begins now. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Wednesday that Democrats face a tough path ahead for the $3.5 trillion spending package after the Senate narrowly confirmed it.
We still have a long road to travel. It's as if we caught a pass, a nice long pass at midfield, but we still have 50 yards to go before we score a touchdown.
Senator Bernie Sanders wrote the budget proposal. It includes $726 billion for childcare, pre-K, and tuition-free community college, $332 billion for low-income and affordable housing subsidies, $265 billion to transform the U.S. energy system away from fossil fuels, and up to $107 billion towards citizenship for illegal immigrants. To help pay for it, Democrats plan to raise taxes on the very wealthy and corporations. According to estimates in the bill, the deficit would increase from $1.3 billion in 2022 up to $1.8 trillion in 2031. Because of this, the national debt would be $45 trillion by 2031. Unlike the infrastructure proposal, Republicans are unified in their opposition to the plan.
What our colleagues are proposing and planning is absolutely jaw-dropping.
And there's no margin for error due to the barest of congressional majorities. And already, concerns from key moderates about the price tag, with West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin saying he has, quote, serious concerns about that $3.5 trillion top-line number. And in the House, a disagreement among Democrats. Progressives want to consider the smaller infrastructure bill and this budget proposal together or not at all. But some moderates want a standalone vote. For now, President Biden drumming up support.
This is the ultimate blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America. And we're going to do it without raising taxes by 1 cent on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. That's
making clear he fully intends to sign his entire agenda into law. The House is slated to return August 23rd and will consider the budget resolution then. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
The Small Business Administration said Wednesday that later in August it will reopen the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, or SVOG. The program was set up as part of a larger plan to help entities that the pandemic hit the hardest. It will close to new applicants on August 20th, but it will reopen to previous applicants for supplemental grants for 50% of their original award amounts. There will be a cap of $10 million. The reopening also gives venues a second chance to prove eligibility and reverse a prior decision. Vice President Kamala Harris will meet with the chief executives of 7 companies to discuss the Biden administration's childcare proposals. The White House is seeking broad support for its agenda. A White House official says the heads of Microsoft, Etsy, Airbnb, Gap, Chobani, Seventh Generation, and Patagonia will attend. They and Harris will discuss childcare provisions in President Biden's agenda for the economy's recovery. The White House hopes the provisions will lower costs for families, help businesses, and grow the economy. The White House did not specify when the 7 companies participating in Thursday's event were chosen. But Democrats are pushing a $3.5 trillion budget plan. The package includes $726 billion for universal preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds and childcare for working families, plus other education subsidies. The Biden administration ordered a new immigration policy Wednesday. It directs agents not to enforce violations on illegal immigrants who are victims of crime, even if they haven't applied for a protected status. NTD's Don Ma has the story.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Tay Johnson issued a new policy directive Wednesday. It orders ICE agents to refrain from arresting and deporting illegal immigrants who are victims of crime. And it orders agents to actively seek evidence that an illegal immigrant is a crime victim while performing their duties. The administration calls the policy a victim-centered approach. Illegal immigrants who are victims of human trafficking, domestic violence, or child abuse can apply for visas that grant them additional rights and protections. This directive applies to victims even if they haven't applied for a protective visa. Johnson says the goal of the policy is to minimize harm and trauma to victims and encourage them to report crimes without fear that they'll be deported. Johnson says the policy will increase immigrants' trust and cooperation with law enforcement, and that helps them prosecute crimes. In June, the Biden administration dismantled a Trump-era program that helped victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. They replaced it with a new service line where victims could report crimes without being asked their immigration status. Critics of the Biden administration's immigration policies say it has encouraged a surge of immigration at the southern border and set off a humanitarian crisis. Don Ma, NTD News.
Colorado authorities are investigating after sensitive election data, including equipment passwords, were posted on social media. Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold tells the Colorado Sun that Mesa County officials are to blame. But Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters says that she can't access the passwords, and only the Secretary of State's office has them. Griswold says that she's confident the leak wasn't from her office and says the breach doesn't put the systems at immediate risk. The Mesa County District Attorney is also investigating, and criminal charges are possible. President Joe Biden plans to host a virtual summit of democracy in December. The White House says the initiative will bolster faith in democratic governance and defend against authoritarianism around the globe. Here's more.
The White House announced Wednesday that President Joe Biden will convene a virtual summit for democracy on December 9th and 10th. In a briefing, the State Department explained the summit would bring Democratic leaders together to counter the rising authoritarian forces around the globe.
The Summit for Democracy reflects President Biden's deeply held belief that in order to tackle the world's most pressing challenges, democracies must come together, learn together, stand together, and act together.
The White House announcement says the December summit will galvanize commitments and initiatives across three principal themes: defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. The Biden administration will plan a second face-to-face gathering in 1 year to review each country's progress toward commitments. The action is widely seen as a face-off against the Chinese Communist Party and its leader, Xi Jinping. In his recent speeches, Xi vowed to see the ruling totalitarian party in China shape mankind's future through socialism.
Today, the Census Bureau is planning to release population data that's used to draw congressional and state legislative district lines. It comes more than 4 months later than usual. Some states are already past their deadlines to draw new maps. That means many will have to hold special sessions in the fall focused on redistricting instead of handling it in the spring, as usual. Virginia and New Jersey plan to use existing maps for state elections in November. Census officials blame the pandemic for delaying the release of data at the neighborhood level. It's expected to show that population growth in the U.S. has been driven entirely by minorities over the past decade. The Census Bureau already released data in April showing which states will gain and lose congressional seats. Texas is set to gain 2 House seats, while Florida, North Carolina, Oregon, Colorado, and Montana gain 1. That's while 7 states will lose a seat. The Pakistani Prime Minister says the Taliban are refusing to talk to the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. He says a political settlement between the insurgents and the Afghan government is looking difficult. Violence is on the rise in Afghanistan as the militant Taliban keep gaining ground. Peace talks have stalled, and a U.S. defense official said the Taliban could take over the capital city Kabul in about 3 months. The Pakistani Prime Minister said the Taliban came to his country and they tried to persuade them to reach a political settlement.
The only thing that would stop Afghanistan from descending into anarchy is a political settlement. But unfortunately, the Taliban when they were here, they felt that they refused to talk to Ashraf Ghani. Their condition is that as long as Ashraf Ghani is there, we are not going to talk to the Afghan government.
Making things worse, Afghanistan's high-ranking finance minister resigned. That's because the country is suffering from dropping revenues after customs ports were taken over. A spokesman said the finance minister couldn't do his job while the country is in its worst economic and security situation. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the U.S. is watching the deteriorating security conditions around parts of the country. She says the U.S. will continue to coordinate airstrikes and support Afghan forces.
And as the president made clear, Afghan leaders have to come together, and the future of the country is really on their shoulders.
The Pentagon insists it is possible to prevent Kabul from falling into the Taliban's hands. The Pentagon makes the statement as the Taliban blitz continues across the country's northeast. They've seized 3 more capitals and a local army headquarters.
And I think it's going to be, it really depends on the kind of political and military leadership that the Afghans can muster to turn this around. They have the capability, they have the capacity, and now it's really time to use those things.
Now the Taliban control about 2/3 of the country, and a senior VP at the CSIS says the Afghan president is largely on his own, and he's losing his support base as the U.S. pulls out of the country. He lays out one of the consequences of a Taliban takeover.
Kind of the worst scenario for me is not just military takeover, but also how Afghan civilians are treated, and then the humanitarian impact that has in the millions potentially of internally displaced persons and refugees outside of the country.
As the militant Taliban kill more civilians, prisoners, and government leaders, calls for change in U.S. policy are growing louder. 5 former U.S. diplomats said the Biden administration must act swiftly to change the course of the country. They said the U.S. should continue its limited engagement and prevent a total collapse of the state. Hundreds of Cubans remain in detention a month after the biggest protests in decades erupted in the communist nation. Some of those detained and their family members describe what they've experienced as U.S. officials call for detainees to be released immediately. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the story.
1 month ago, protests erupted suddenly in Cuba over deteriorating economic conditions and restrictions on freedoms. Government security forces clamped down on and began detaining protesters. According to the Cuban Observatory of Human Rights, at least 757 people were arrested or went missing, some of them minors. Gabriela Zacara is just 17. She says she was surprised by the protests and was watching them when a woman aggressively took her into custody.
She put me in the patrol car. She hit me with the edge of the door when I was entering. She took me to the station and I asked her why. Why was I here? I didn't know anything. I'm a minor. I am 17. She told me it was because I was a counter-revolutionary.
Zacara says police treated her badly and wouldn't let her speak to her family. She was given an 8-month sentence, but they let her serve it at home. Jacqueline Salas says authorities severely restrict contact with her detained husband.
I speak to him for 3 minutes, nothing more. Sometimes he has to share those 3 minutes between his mother and me. It's very quick. We haven't been able to see each other. I have just seen him from afar in the trial. He can't even look at me because he is made to look at the front. The truth is, it's very cruel.
State Department spokesman Ned Price says the protesters should be released.
We join the families who are suffering and scared, Cuba's human rights defenders, and those who share our concern around the world, in calling for the immediate release of all those detained or missing for merely exercising their rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly.
Salas says she thinks the government is trying to make an example of detainees like her husband to scare people and prevent them from starting another protest. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Poland advanced a bill that the opposition says aims to silence a U.S.-owned news channel critical of the government. The U.S. is one of Warsaw's most important allies and swiftly denounced the bill.
Polish lawmakers have passed a bill that may mean the end of a major TV channel critical of the government. The government says the bill's needed to stop countries like Russia and China from taking control of Polish media. But opponents see it as a way to push U.S. media giant Discovery selling TVN24, the most watched independent channel in Poland, and say the bill is an attack on media freedoms. Earlier this week, thousands of Poles took to the streets in protest of the proposed changes. They gathered outside Parliament and in cities across the country. Discovery's ownership is also one of the largest investments by the U.S. in Poland. However, the new bill would change the rules for foreign ownership of broadcasters and could put a stop to Discovery's control of TVN. It also comes just before the channel's license is set to expire next month. Its passage drew swift condemnation from Washington, one of Warsaw's most important allies. One opposition lawmaker says future U.S. investments in the country could be at stake.
Today it concerns one of the TV stations. We all know which one it is. But in fact, it affects the security of Poland, because no normal investor will want to invest in a country where in one evening a law can be passed de facto ejecting capital from an allied country.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington was deeply troubled by the bill and said it may undermine what he called Poland's strong investment climate. But a spokesman for Poland's government dismissed criticisms, saying the government had the right to regulate questions about capital.
In an effort to get more young people vaccinated, the White House and Dr. Anthony Fauci are teaming up with Gen Z influencers to promote vaccination. But the method is raising some eyebrows. Here are the details.
The White House is adopting a new method to promote COVID-19 vaccination among young people, Gen Z TikTok influencers.
What's up, dudes? What's up, Dr. Fauci?
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki gave details about the initiative Tuesday after an email about the effort was leaked online.
Today, Dr. Fauci is doing 5 Q&A conversations on Instagram and TikTok with millennial, mom influencers and Gen Z influencers.
Psaki added that throughout August, Fauci will do weekly Q&As with notable influencers to boost vaccination rates. On Tuesday morning, Newsmax host Benny Johnson shared a confidential email sent to TikTok influencers on behalf of the White House. The email implored influencers to do an intimate Zoom call with Fauci to educate youth as young as 12 about the vaccine. Already, a number of young TikTokers with millions of followers have gotten on board. Here are some of the videos.
It's great to meet you, Dr. Fauci. I had a couple questions about the vaccine.
That's it.
Awesome. You happy, Dr. Fauci?
Hi, Dr. Fauci. It's such an honor to meet you.
It's my pleasure, Claudia. It's really great to be with you.
So we're trying to have a Vax Girl Summer.
My first question for you is the actual COVID virus in the vaccine?
The answer is absolutely not.
We've vaccinated 160 million Americans. Are you getting this all down?
Don't worry, Queen. It's all right here.
While some think the effort is a good way to promote vaccination and clear up misinformation, it's also raising some eyebrows, with a number of people likening it to propaganda. Independent journalist Jordan Skatchell wrote on Twitter, "So the government is paying tons of influencers to bring Fauci on their programs in order to feed him softballs so that he can continue to avoid any real scrutiny. Worse than Pravda. It's unknown if or how much the White House is paying the influencers for the promotion." According to the New York Times, state and local governments are employing similar campaigns, in some cases paying local micro-influencers up to $1,000 a month to promote COVID vaccines to their fans. According to the CDC, fewer than half of Americans aged 18 to 39 are fully vaccinated. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
New York Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul says that she is prepared to run for governor in 2022. That's after she steps in to complete Governor Andrew Cuomo's term.
We understand you formed a political team. Does this mean you're going to seek a full term in 2022?
Yes, it's not the time to talk politics, but I am prepared to run for re-election and begin the process as soon as we get everything under control in the state.
Been fundraising?
Yes, I've been fundraising to run for re-election as lieutenant governor, and I have a war chest I plan to expand, but that's not going to be my main focus. My main focus is going to be working for the people of the state of New York.
Hochul takes over Andrew Cuomo's position as governor in a couple of weeks. Cuomo announced his resignation on Tuesday and is still under the threat of impeachment by the New York State government. Hochul did not comment on that, and she also didn't comment on her feelings about Cuomo, but says the findings from the New York Attorney General's investigation on his sexual harassment accusations were reprehensible, repulsive, and unlawful. The governor of Colorado says that his state should be able to reopen parts of a highway. That's after crews removed massive amounts of mud and debris following a mudslide that hit the area late last month.
A lot of this area that we're at and just ahead was buried under 10 to 15 feet of mud just as short as a week ago. And frankly, CDOT engineers didn't know what would happen when they dug to the bottom. Fortunately, in the other areas covered with mud, there was no structural damage to the road. Here at mile marker 123.5, there was just damage to a very limited area, and those repairs will be complete enough to allow for one lane each way by Saturday afternoon.
The mudslides that occurred on July 29th stranded more than 100 people in their vehicles overnight. It caused 46 miles along the highway to close. It also forced commercial and personal vehicle traffic to take detours that added hours. This interstate connects Denver to the West Coast, and state transportation workers have been removing thousands of tons of debris. And now the Federal Highway Administration is authorizing an initial $11.6 million in funding for the work. But Polis is requesting over $100 million in emergency federal aid. Mudslides have become more frequent and intense since the Grizzly Creek fire scorched about 50 square miles in the canyon last summer. And the Bureau of Reclamation imposes new water use limits on the Colorado River. But the move presents a new challenge for farmers in Arizona's Pinal County. More soon on NTD News.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here with a new message about your Medicare benefits. You may be entitled to transportation, meals, and expanded coverage for dental work that includes extractions, fillings, and dentures, all at no additional cost. Plus, depending on your zip code, you may be entitled to the Medicare benefit that adds money to your Social Security check every single month. Call and get everything you deserve. Call now. It's free.
I'm on a fixed income, so I called to get money added to my Social Security check. They helped me so much.
I called to save money on copays, get prescriptions, transportation, and my dental work covered. I couldn't believe I was spending money I don't have to spend.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline, and you can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
Peace comes from within. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The human body is the temple of God, and religion is the experience of God within yourself. Are you ready to discover the truth within yourself? Book an appointment now at divinelight.com.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
California's largest wildfire in recorded history continues to grow after destroying more than 1,000 buildings. Officials are calculating the damage to seek more aid.
At this point, we are in the process of doing a damage assessment to take into the totality of all of the losses in the multiple counties that have been impacted by these series of fires. Everything from Placer County in the River Fire down south, all the way up to Siskiyou County and Trinity Counties, the Monument McFarland fire in the north.
If there's even a blade of grass near you, that is enough to start a fire these days. It is so dry, and the way we've seen this burn through live timber in the tens of thousands of acres an hour is unlike anything we've seen other than a few times. And those few times, most of them have been within the last year or 2 years.
California officials on Wednesday toured areas affected by the Dixie Fire, even as the blaze continues to burn. California officials hope to seek more federal emergency aid after the damage assessment is done. The Dixie Fire is the largest single fire in California history and the largest currently burning in the U.S. At least 14,000 homes were still threatened. There are about 100 large blazes burning across 15 states. Historic drought conditions have left lands dry and ripe for fires to start. New limits on the water supply from the Colorado River are hitting farmers in Arizona. The rules will force them to rethink everything from the crops they grow to how many workers they employ. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Drought and demand will soon force the first ever mandatory water supply cuts from the Colorado River. Around 40 million people across the West depend on it. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation made the decision in mid-August to impose new limits. Farmers in Arizona's Pinal County will be among the hardest hit. That means big changes for farmer Will Tillander of Tempe Farming Co.
Because of the Colorado River cutbacks, we're losing a large portion of our water, and specifically on the stuff I manage, we're losing about half our deliverable water potentially next year.
Pinal County is Arizona's top producer of cotton, barley, and livestock, and the cuts are coming earlier than expected, after the drought intensified and reservoirs dipped to historic lows. Farmers knew this was coming. Many voluntarily left fields fallow, laser-leveled the land, lined canals, installed drip irrigation, and experimented with drought-resistant crops. One potential crop that may take root in this new low-water world is guayuli, a drought-resistant shrub that could be used in rubber production. Tillander's farm is participating in a research study to see if the shrub can be used on a large scale.
Bridgestone Tire Company is doing a test to potentially grow a lot more of it, and they're looking into building a big factory in Mesa. So this plant uses about half as much water over the course of a year and on a much easier time schedule than any other crop.
Cuts to the water supply may be an environmental necessity, but it also means fewer available jobs for some farm workers. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A NASA spacecraft has gathered data on an asteroid called Bennu that could potentially prove dangerous to our planet. The OSIRIS-REx mission spent more than 2 years orbiting Bennu. During that time, it was able to get unprecedented information for researchers. That's so they can better understand Bennu's future path, and so they can predict how Earth's gravity will alter the asteroid's path when it makes its close approach to the Earth. They're expecting that to happen in the year 2135. Scientists determined that between now and the year 2300, the probability that Bennu will make impact is very low. On the mission, the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft was also able to get a sample from the asteroid. The sample will arrive back to Earth in 2 years. This study was published on Wednesday in the journal Icarus. The Chinese regime is threatening the head of a private art school in San Francisco to cause her to resign. But she's not planning to give up. Here's NTD's Eileen Ng with more details.
Half a block from Golden Gate Park is the San Francisco High School of the Arts. It is a private art school for middle and high school students. It also offers dance, music, and visual arts courses. A group of Bay Area parents founded the school in 2010, hoping their children would learn more traditional arts. But recently, the principal, Sherry Zhang, said the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, threatened her parents.
So the national security officers visited them and threatened that if I don't stop being the principal and head of school of San Francisco High School of the Arts, then they may forcefully close down my parents' enterprise, and they may even go to jail.
The CCP is threatening Zhang because she practices a spiritual discipline called Falun Dafa. Under CCP rule, practitioners are tortured and killed for their beliefs. Zhang's parents are not Falun Dafa practitioners, but she said her parents are in danger of losing their business of 30 years.
They've been hardworking and honest business people, and they invest so much into their business. So of course they don't want it to close down, and it has been detrimental for them.
But Zhang doesn't plan on giving up the school because she is one of the founders.
And we are here to teach students to have perseverance. We also teach them, because through traditional art training, they learn to work hard, they learn to not giving in, and they learn to persevere, they learn to have self-discipline. So all of the values that we are teaching our students, they learning through the traditional art training is exactly what I also need to maintain during this incident.
The school's mission is to provide students with an exceptional education in traditional arts and academics while focusing on character development, so that they may positively contribute to the world. Zhang believes that having a good education that passes down culture and knowledge is important for future society. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Pandemic outbreaks are popping up across China, and authorities are resorting to prevention measures that critics consider extreme. In some of the worst cases, neighborhoods are sealed off, with residents locked inside their homes. Here's NTD's Tiffany Meyer with more on the story.
A new wave of the CCP virus is hitting a dozen Chinese provinces. At the same time, more videos are circulating online showing the authorities' extreme control measures, such as sealing residents inside their homes if they don't comply. A video shows a man just a few steps from his home during exercises in the yard with no one else around. But pandemic control officers found him and sent him back inside. They followed him to his door and then sealed it shut.
进去，警告一次。好了，马上就回去，2分钟。警告第二次。2分钟。注意哪动？ 不要后悔哈！我干嘛了？你干嘛了？口罩戴了吗？就在门口晒。不要跟我讲幕，我知道。我看到谁了？我知道，我跟你说一下。不要跟我讲。你看到吧？回家。走。
A minute later, the man tried to open his door and argue, but he was forced back inside. Another video shows a group chat. Someone in quarantine at home complained that their door would be sealed without warning if the pandemic control staff found that the residents opened the doors up to 3 times a day. They can't even dump their garbage. The person says the garbage sits inside and stinks. Reports of similarly harsh virus prevention measures are also coming in from the city of Wuhan. An entrance to one neighborhood was welded shut in an attempt to halt virus spread.
把门焊死，
焊死，出不去了。The entrance was sealed on Sunday after one person there had reportedly tested positive for the CCP virus, or the Chinese Communist Party virus known as COVID-19. The Epoch Times reached out to the local police station in charge of the area. The station informed the newspaper that 2 small gates in the neighborhood are still passable, and added that officers didn't know how long the area would stay closed. Many are taking issue with the city's strict measures. One netizen commented online, writing, "What if a resident there is ill and needs an ambulance?" Another one questioned the Chinese regime's methods, noting they would rather kill a group of people in order to control the epidemic. The people are currently starving, dying of illness and flooding, but some people simply can't see it. Wuhan was the original epicenter of the pandemic in China when the virus first broke out last year. This year, the communist regime is embracing the same harsh measures used last year, including locking people in their homes and pausing standard movement and activities.
Still to come, the European drug regulator is looking into side effects associated with CCP virus vaccines. This is in addition to the heart inflammation link already discovered. And Rio's beautiful lagoons are in trouble. Picturesque views there are now tainted by sewage and pollution, despite cleanup efforts ahead of the 2016 Olympic Games. Find out more in just a minute.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Is deep sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritan green vegetable omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
Europe's drug regulators are studying possible side effects reported in some people after they became vaccinated against the virus. All 4 major vaccines are under the microscope: Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson.
Shares in Moderna and Pfizer sank on Wednesday after the European Union drug regulator said it was looking into possible new side effects of the company's COVID-19 vaccines. That includes kidney inflammation, an allergic skin reaction, and a renal disorder with heavy protein loss in urine. Pfizer is by far the biggest supplier of COVID-19 vaccines to the European Union, issuing just over 330 million doses in the region, compared to some 43 million from Moderna. Both companies did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment. The European Medicines Agency has not recommended any changes to the vaccine labels. It says the latest assessment is part of routine updates to the safety section of the authorized vaccines database. It's also looking into menstrual disorders as a possible side effect of vaccines, including those from AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. Last month, the EMA found a possible link between very rare heart inflammation and Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines, which use mRNA technology. However, the European regulator and the World Health Organization have stressed that benefits from these vaccines outweigh any risks. The watchdog did not give details on Wednesday on how many cases of the new side effects were recorded, but said it's requested more data from both companies.
European tourists are flocking back to Berlin, visiting the German capital's cultural venues and historical sites. It's a change from the past year and a half, when the city had lived in the shadow of pandemic restrictions.
Berlin's landmark Brandenburg Gate is seeing a return of tourists. That's as Germany breathes a sigh of relief after a year and a half of pandemic restrictions. A couple from Lithuania says they drove all the way to Berlin. They had planned their trip last year.
We had 2 years at home. We can't go because it was Corona time, and now we can feel free. Yeah, now we are free.
And next to the river Spree, visitors are lining up to enter the DDR Museum. DDR is the German abbreviation for the East German Communist State. The museum is one of Berlin's top Cold War historical attractions. Normally, it draws up to 1 million visitors per year.
We are at about 40% compared to 2019. That means that 60% is missing, mostly from international guests that are missing from the city. It is developing slowly but surely since we opened on the 24th of June.
The museum was forced to close for 7 months amid the pandemic. Even during its open months, its visitor numbers were still restricted. Now it's operating at full capacity. Once a divided city, Berlin lacks major industry or a large financial sector.
The structure in Berlin is very clearly focused on tourism and provides for 250,000 workplaces. That is, of course, an economical factor in Berlin. We don't have much industry here, and many service providers are also tied to the tourism sector.
Virus infections are spreading again in Germany, but transmission rates are still lower than in other European countries, like France, the UK, and Spain. Visitors to the DDR museum say they're not worried about getting sick on their trips.
Once we are inside the buildings, we keep distancing, we use masks, so there's no reason to be afraid.
Berlin ranks third on the list of most visited European cities after London and Paris. Currently, unvaccinated travelers must take a CCP virus test before arriving in Germany.
Horses are starving on the drought-stricken Kazakh steppe. This year, record-high temperatures have swept through the region, claiming a huge number of animal lives. Here are the details.
Dead horses lie scattered across this arid steppe, causing this chilling scene. This summer, an unusual drought has plagued the Mangistau Peninsula in western Kazakhstan. Without food or water, thousands of horses, cattle, and sheep have perished, leaving locals to worry about the future.
We have had 2-3 years of drought, 3 years. The grass didn't grow well, although it was not as bad as this year. There was only black grass, as we call it.
The farm owner explained he already lost 20 horses from his herd. The animals still alive are skinny, with ribs clearly visible. Many have been weakened by malnutrition.
When they die out there in the field, we cannot even bring them back to the village to report the death.
Horse meat and milk are staples of the Kazakh diet. Breeding horses and camels is a traditional occupation. Due to high temperatures, Kazakhstan banned exports of animal feed. The country is now seeking supplemental water from its neighbors. Officials say barley shipments are on the way, but the food likely won't sustain the animals. Some farmers tear wet cardboard into pieces and mix it with animal feed to boost its volume.
If the authorities give me a truckload of water a day, or at least once, 2 or 3 days, I would be able to take care of the animals.
According to a climate researcher at Kazakhstan's state weather forecast, average temperatures in the country are rising by over 30 degrees Fahrenheit every decade.
Here we look at Rio's beautiful lagoons. The stately Olympic Park overlooks the majesty. It's picturesque from a distance, but up close, it's actually filled with sewage. The Olympic cleanup was not enough to turn around decades of carelessness. Here's more.
Here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, all seems well in the city's beautiful lagoons. In the trees, cranes glide over the water. The capybaras hide from their predators, the caimans. It's a member of the alligator family and where one of the lagoons got its name. But despite the lovely views, the area is struggling.
Here we still have a varied bird population. There are several animals that have virtually disappeared in the town of Rio de Janeiro, and this is ecotourism. However, due to decades of carelessness, we transformed this whole economic and ecotourism potential into a big latrine.
Large population growth outpaced infrastructure upgrades, leaving cleaning systems far behind, leaving sewage from the area to filter down into the lagoons. Locals had hoped an Olympic cleanup ahead of the 2016 Games would save the area, but lawsuits and bureaucracy stalled the process. Now they're waiting for laws that will regulate the waste problem and turn the water clear again.
There was very large growth. It was in Rio State's region of largest growth in the 90s until 2000, Barra de Tijuca and the region of Jacarapagua. But the sewage network didn't follow, so it's being poured directly into the lagoon's water.
Here at Rio's government-run environmental labs, scientists monitor the local water quality on a weekly basis. They tell people which beaches are safe to bathe in. But with polluted lagoon water leaking into the ocean, it can be unpredictable.
These are islands of mud and rubbish, and here the Tijuca Lagoon is transformed into a shallow canal where sewage goes into Barra Beach.
Biologist Mario Moscatelli explains how litter and trash creates islands in the canals, and the bacteria from the sewage turns the water green. His team planted mangrove trees after the Olympics to try to bring back some of the wildlife. and the effort saw some success. But with sewage still flowing in, it's not enough to turn the tide. Others, including some former residents, have since been enlisted to help collect garbage.
I myself, alone with a small boat, am able to remove 1 ton of plastic, tires, sofas, TV sets, glass, everything per day. So this is the legacy left for the population of Rio de Janeiro.
Once in the precious metals business, Joe now makes his living through the cleanup effort. Concerned parties pay him to recycle debris found in the water, and the city's government also hired him a helper. The worst of the waste he collects isn't the large items in the sewage, but the tiny pieces of plastic that are hard to pick up.
This is micro rubbish. It's the worst kind of rubbish for the environment.
Hundreds of local fishermen still make a living on the water, but the fish species that used to come from the ocean to reproduce have lessened. Now fishermen catch just one species, tilapia. The city's Olympic stadiums sit mostly empty, and much of the population has been relocated. For Rio's beautiful lagoons, the future remains uncertain.
Barbie is celebrating the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, with a collectible doll. It's to mark Elvis Week that started yesterday and goes until Tuesday. The doll is dressed in Presley's American Eagle jumpsuit, which features colorful rhinestones, a cape, and a red scarf. Presley wore the jumpsuit during a lot of concert appearances. Included with the signature doll is a certificate of authenticity. In 1973, Elvis made television and entertainment history with his album Elvis, Aloha from Hawaii, via satellite. Billboard is a music popularity ranking site, and he was #1 on their pop album chart. But it would be his last #1 album on that chart. Presley died on August 16, 1977, at his Graceland home in Memphis, Tennessee. He was found on the floor of his bathroom by his fiancée. Starting the day with the right food can be tricky, so we've put together 5 tips to start the day in a smoother way.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body, I'm Gina Marie. The morning routines of nearly every single person have been turned upside down over the last year. Lockdowns, self-isolation, and working from home can make productive morning routines seem like a difficult task. So here are 6 morning tips to try out. Number 1, wake up 15 minutes earlier. Mornings should be reserved for tea or coffee and contemplation. Ideally, you don't just want to jump out of bed and get into the day too fast. So try to just wake up and be for a little while. This obviously isn't possible for everyone, especially if you have a newborn. Having any amount of free time is wishful thinking, but if you constantly feel like your mornings are a chaotic rush, you might want to get up a little earlier. You could set your alarm 15 minutes earlier. It might not seem like much, but you can spend that time however you want, like engaging in a daily self-care routine. Number 2, 10 minutes of exercise. If you want to get your body moving and you have the time, consider going for a morning run or a brisk walk. You could also try a 10-minute yoga workout. Physical activity increases blood flow, stimulates the brain, and enhances your mental performance. Number 3, establish a tech-free zone. Instead of using your phone, go out and purchase an actual alarm clock. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The reason, it's a simple way to prevent you from laying in bed and scrolling through emails, social media, or the news. In addition to being a waste of time and distraction, it's not good for your health and well-being. Number 4, activate all of your senses. You may not have realized this before, but as soon as you rise and shine, all of your senses are being put to work. It could be the sound of that alarm clock or birds chirping. If you have a coffee maker with a timer, you might smell that brewing. And you can feel and see the sun on your skin. Instead of tuning out, pay attention to these 5 senses and infuse them into your morning routine. Tapping into your senses will help you to make better decisions. And more importantly, it can help you to slow down, be more present, and appreciate what you have at the moment. And finally, be sure to soak up the sun. In the morning, sunlight promotes wakefulness in the body. The reason? It suppresses the production of melatonin, which gives you more energy. Open the blinds as soon as you wake up to give your body energy, and make sure you get plenty of sunlight throughout the day.
Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.